Greetings and a warm welcome to our channel, Eternal Truths. In this, our first presentation, Answers for Our Catholic Friends, we will journey back to the very beginning of Christianity in the 1st century AD and explore the teachings and doctrines of the Church of Rome under the glorious light of the Holy Scriptures. We pray that you will find this presentation helpful in your daily walk with Christ. The Roman Catholic Church teaches that the Apostle Peter was the first pope, and that his authority was passed on to his successors. This doctrine is also known as the Petrine theory. To authenticate the belief that Peter was the first pope, the Church of Rome points to Matthew chapter 16, verses 15 to 19. "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Peter's confession was the rock and the foundation of the church, but not Peter himself. Scripture reveals that the other apostles shared Peter's authority, and the loosing and binding authority attributed to him was also shared by the local churches, not just the church leaders. One can read all these references in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 to 19. "If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you that if 2 of you on earth agree about anything they ask for, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven." The book of Acts records the first Christian practices and beliefs, which did not involve complex theological teachings or the introduction of extra-biblical doctrines. The Apostle Paul visited the city of Antioch in AD 46, over 40 years after the resurrection. In Acts chapter 11, verse 25 to 26, we read, "Then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch." There is nothing in the New Testament that Peter was ever in the 1st century church in Rome. The Roman Church bases this claim solely on their traditions. Peter's audience in his first sermon is recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 2, verses 8 to 11, during Pentecost in Jerusalem. "Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Peter's audience were Jews from across the Roman Empire, including those from Rome, Syria, Egypt and Arabia. Those Romans who believed went back to their homes and started the church there. In fact, Peter was in Jerusalem from that Pentecost Sunday in AD 30 or 33 until he left Jerusalem about AD 44, more than 10 years later. The rejection and persecution of Christians by the Caesars began under Claudius, who expelled all the Jews from Rome in AD 49. The expulsion had a significant impact on the churches in Rome. This is recorded in the book of Acts, chapter 18, verse 2. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them. In AD 55, Paul was arrested by the Roman authorities in Jerusalem. After a 2-year internment in Caesarea Maritima, he endured a long and perilous journey involving a shipwreck off the coast of Malta. In AD 60, Paul arrived in Rome and was placed under house arrest. There he wrote several letters to other churches in Ephesus, Philippi, and Colossae, and to a fellow Christian named Philemon. His letter to the Romans, written around AD 57, Paul did not mention Peter at all. If Peter was the leader or bishop of the church in Rome, Paul would have surely greeted him first. The claim that Peter was the bishop or the first pope in Rome is taught in Catholic tradition only, with no supporting historical evidence. In AD 64, Nero blamed Christians for a fire that destroyed 3 districts of Rome, although some Romans suspected Nero started the fire himself. After 6 days, the inferno left 70% of the city a smouldering ruin. Christians were an easy target for the deranged emperor, and those arrested were tortured and publicly executed. Some were crucified, some were thrown to wild animals, and others were covered in wax and burned alive as living torches to light Nero's dinner parties at night. Although it is uncertain when the apostles Paul and Peter were executed, both men were likely put to death between AD 64 to 68 during this widespread persecution. The Roman Senate grew tired of Nero's brutalities, and with the support of the army, declared him public enemy. Nero fled Rome to a suburban villa, where he committed suicide before he could be arrested and put on trial. The suicide of Nero was followed by a brief period of civil war. Between AD June 68 and December 69, 4 emperors ruled within a year. These were Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. Galba was murdered on the orders of his rival, Otho. Vitellius defeated Otho at the Battle of Bedriacum in northern Italy, resulting in Otho's suicide. Vitellius was, in turn, defeated and killed by Vespasian in a battle for control over the city of Rome. Vespasian ruled as Roman emperor from AD 69 to 79. He brought stability back to Rome, instituted political reform, restored discipline in the army, and began a major building program in Rome that included the Colosseum. He died in AD 79 at the age of 69 after falling ill. Vespasian's oldest son, Titus, was an able military commander who led the siege of and eventual sack of Jerusalem in AD 70. Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian who lived in Rome, estimated that over 1 million people died during the siege. He attributed the high death toll to the celebration of Passover, which crowded the city. At least 97,000 Jews were taken as slaves. Many were used to complete the construction of the Colosseum, which was also paid for by the plunder taken from Jerusalem. After the siege was over, Vespasian ordered all the Christian prisoners to be released. He showed no mercy to the Jews and sold them 30 for a penny to his men to do as they pleased with them. Very little persecution of Christians was recorded at this time, although Linus, the leader of the church in Rome, died in AD 76 at the age of 66. Although it is not known whether Linus died from natural causes or martyrdom, it is thought that this is the same Linus who was mentioned in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 21. Do your best to get here before winter. Eubulus greets you, and so do Pudens, Linus, Claudia, and all the brothers and sisters. Titus succeeded his father as Caesar in AD 79, but ruled for only 2 years before dying from fever in AD 81 at the age of 41. Titus was succeeded by his younger brother Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 AD and was the last of the Flavian emperors. Domitian proved to be a ruthless dictator and put to death some of the Roman senators, some through malice and others to confiscate their estates. He wisely gave the army a large pay raise in 84 AD, a move that helped secure his position as Caesar. But it was not enough. In 96 AD, he was murdered by a group that included his own Praetorian guards, palace officials, and even his wife. There is very little in the way of contemporary accounts concerning any alleged persecution of Christians under Domitian's rule. We know that the Apostle John was exiled on the island of Patmos during Domitian's reign, where he wrote the Gospel of John and the Book of Revelation. He was released after Domitian's death and taken to Ephesus, where he lived for the remainder of his life, dying in AD 98 at the age of 90. After Domitian's murder, Nerva, a Roman official with a long imperial service under Nero and the succeeding rulers of the Flavian dynasty, was declared emperor at the age of 66. Nerva did not punish Christians or other groups except when laws were broken. He was considered a wise and moderate emperor who was generous to Rome's population, giving money and free grain to poor citizens. On the 1st of January 98, Nerva suffered a stroke during a private audience. Shortly thereafter, he was struck by a fever and died at the age of 67. Trajan was emperor from AD 98 to 117. Trajan's policies toward Christians were a mix of tolerance and repression. In 112 AD, Pliny the Younger, the governor of Bithynia, now in modern-day Turkey, wrote to Trajan for guidance on handling the growing Christian population in his province. Trajan's response to Pliny's letter was to allow local authorities to enforce policies against Christians, but not to specifically seek out Christians for trial. Trajan died at the age of 63 from a stroke while sailing from the city of Selinus to Rome in Asia Minor in August AD 117. He was replaced by his cousin, Hadrian. Although he was also a pagan, Hadrian was tolerant of Christians and continued the policies of his predecessor, which prohibited the persecution of Christians based on their beliefs. He died in AD 138 from heart failure at the age of 62. His successor and adopted son, Antonius Pius, ruled from AD 138 to 161 and continued with the same policy of leaving Christians alone unless they committed an actual crime. Antonius died from fever at the age of 74, and his policy of toleration towards Christians ended. Marcus Aurelius succeeded Hadrian and ruled from 161 to 180 AD. The most violent persecution of Christians during his rule occurred in Lugdunum, Gaul, now the modern-day city of Lyon, in France. Christians were forbidden to enter the marketplace, the forum, the baths, or to appear in any public places. If they were found in any of those locations, they would be mocked, beaten, robbed, and their houses would be vandalized by the mob. During Marcus Aurelius' persecutions, Justin the Martyr, a Christian apologist from Palestine, was put on trial in Rome and executed in AD 165, about the age of 65, for proclaiming Jesus Christ as Lord and refusing to pay homage to the Roman gods. Marcus Aurelius died 15 years later in AD 180 of plague at the age of 58. Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, co-ruled with his father, commencing in AD 177 until 192. Every year of Commodus's rule was marked by greed, suspicion, and numerous murders. Surprisingly, no edicts were issued against the Christians, who, though persecuted by the governors and magistrates in some provinces, enjoyed a period of respite and comparative immunity from pursuit. There were many Christians in the court of Commodus who were protected by Marcia, a mistress of the morally dubious Commodus. She was the first high-level public Roman patron of Christians in the imperial court and heavily influenced Commodus's policies of religious toleration. She also secured the release of Christian slaves from the mines on the island of Sardinia. Commodus was later murdered by a wrestler called Narcissus, who was paid by several high-level conspirators. After the death of Commodus, another civil war briefly erupted, culminating in a power struggle known as the Year of the Five Emperors. The five men who claimed the title of Roman Emperor were Pertinax, Didius Julianus, Pescennius Niger, Clodius Albinus, and Septimius Severus. Ultimately, Septimius Severus survived all 4 challenges and firmly established his rule as emperor in 193. He instituted military and administrative reforms that stabilized the empire, secured its frontiers, and replenished its treasury. During the early years of the reign of Septimius, Christians enjoyed comparative peace and considerable favor by the emperor. Early in the 3rd century, a change set in, and in 202, Septimius issued an edict forbidding conversion to Christianity and Judaism. The cause of this radical change is not clear, but it is possible that the emperor was concerned with the rapid spread of Christianity. This may have caused him to fear that the old Roman institutions would be overturned or forgotten. The persecutions occurred mainly in Syria and Africa. In AD 203, 2 prominent Christian women from Carthage, Perpetua, a well-educated Christian noblewoman aged 22, and her Christian servant Felicitas, were arrested and later died in a Roman prison. In AD 2010, after leading a 2-year campaign in Caledonia, now Scotland, Septimius fell ill and was taken to the city of Eboracum, now the city of York, in northern England. He died on the 4th of February 211, aged 65. In January AD 250, the Emperor Decius issued an imperial edict commanding that all citizens of the empire make sacrifices to the traditional Roman gods. This decision was made due to the number of Roman citizens embracing the Christian faith and abandoning paganism. Those who were obedient and performed the sacrifices were issued with a certificate or libelli to show they obeyed the order. Those Christians who refused were killed or imprisoned. The 2 main leaders of the church, Cornelius of Rome and Hippolytes of Jerusalem, both refused to pay homage to the gods of Rome and died in prison. After Decius was killed in a battle against the Goths in 251, the persecution of Christians continued under his successor, Trebonianus Gallus, from 251 to 253 AD. Origen of Alexandria, an early Christian scholar, was imprisoned in Libya and died in 253 as a result of the injuries inflicted during his imprisonment. In AD 257, the Emperor Valerian condemned Christians to exile or to work in the mines. He issued a second and more severe edict a year later, ordering the death penalty for anyone who identified as a Christian. In AD 260, Valerian lost the Battle of Edessa in Persia and died as a prisoner of the Emperor Shapur. In AD 286, the Emperor Diocletian decided that the Roman Empire was too big to manage by a single leader due to growing instability, power struggles, and civil wars. He divided the empire into 2 parts, the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. Maximian ruled the western part of the Roman Empire, while Diocletian ruled the east, as part of the tetrarchy system established by Diocletian, where they were both designated as Augusti, or senior emperors. 2 other Caesars served under both men, namely Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west, completing the tetrarchy. This power-sharing was designed to ensure a more efficient administration of the empire, thus ensuring a more effective response to external threats. Diocletian carried out the last, but most severe persecution of Christians from AD 303 to 311. During this 8-year reign of terror, Christians were hunted, stripped of their rights, brutalized and killed. Church homes were demolished, and precious copies of the scriptures and writings of the church fathers were burned. He also purged the Roman army of soldiers who identified as Christians, including senior officers who fought bravely in battle. Weakened by illness, Diocletian withdrew from public life in AD 305. He was replaced as emperor by his son-in-law, Galerius Valerius Maximianus, a successful military commander who won several notable victories in Europe and Persia. Galerius was a staunch pagan who maintained the persecution of the Christians by his father-in-law. In the winter of 311, Galerius was on his deathbed, suffering from an illness thought by some modern medical specialists to be a form of rapidly spreading gangrene. Fearing that his illness was punishment by the Christian god, the dying emperor asked Christian leaders to pray for him, as he reluctantly granted the Edict of Toleration in Serdica, now modern-day Sofia, in Bulgaria. The edict implicitly granted the recognition of Christianity and the freedom of Christians to worship in the Eastern Roman Empire. From AD 30 to AD 311, 54 emperors ruled the empire. 12 of them issued edicts specifically targeting Christians, while other Caesars left the persecutions to local governors and magistrates in various provinces. It is estimated by some historians that over 100,000 Christians were enslaved, imprisoned, and killed during the reign of the Caesars, with over 20,000 victims alone under Diocletian's reign. There is no doubt that the blood of those precious martyrs for Christ fueled church growth despite these persecutions. Throughout this dark period in the history of the Christian faith, no mention was made of an official Roman church, a single leader or pope, or the veneration of Mary. Christianity finally found full recognition during the reign of the Emperor Constantine. He was the son of a Roman official, Constantius I, and his Christian concubine, Flavia Julia Helen, placing him in line to succeed the throne of the Western Roman Empire. At age 31, he prepared to attack his chief rival Maxentius with an army outnumbered 4-1. Before the battle, known today as the Battle of the Milvian Bridge on October 28, 312 AD, Constantine claimed to have seen a cross of light in the sky with a specific symbol telling him, "By this sign, conquer." Constantine ordered his troops to mark their shields with this symbol, the chi rho, an early Greek word meaning Christus, or Christ, then a symbol commonly representing Christianity. The chi rho combines the first two letters in the Greek word for Christ, and resembles a capital P with an X drawn through the center. Constantine won the battle and became emperor of the Western Roman Empire. The chi rho symbol would be part of Constantine's signature for the rest of his life.